So obviously this is up to December last year. We're at the start of a new year. Last year, pretty interesting year, as is usually the case. Lots of change happening around the world, but also plenty going on locally too. Generally, my summary is, look, values have been soft again over the last 12 months. Throughout a lot of 2024, after the election in late 2023, we saw values softening as we had a big increase in sellers and a pulling back of buyers. That started to turn a corner for a few months. We saw a bit of a recovery in the last few months. Again, we've seen softness in values, but if we look at other indicators, it looks like we possibly could be turning a corner. Other things are showing signs that we're heading in the right direction from a seller's perspective. This is my message to sellers, therefore, is, look, yes, values have been soft again recently, but possibly we're turning a corner now. Buyers, still plenty of choice out there. Get in amongst it. So let's get into it. December 2024, median sale price 765,500 versus a year prior 809. So that's a bit of a drop there, down 5%. This is not the best guide to underlying values, though. The trend is still useful and relevant, I suppose, but month to month. So a December versus December number I wouldn't pay too much attention to. 6-month moving average is the red line there, and you can see it's been broadly stable since the middle of 2022. A little bit down throughout 2023 and a little bit up versus 2024, then down again more recently slightly, but broadly going sideways. So the best guide to underlying values is the Real Estate Institute House Price Index. So let's look at the league tables here. Wellington still at 24% down from the peak, still is the market that's fallen the furthest since the peak. Auckland not too far behind at 21 and a bit percent, but Wellington's quite a bit ahead of most of the rest of the country. Over the last year, similar story, still the biggest drop compared to everywhere else. So 5% down, broadly speaking, over a year ago for the Wellington region. So, I mean, not massive, but not nothing either. We'd prefer a 5% rise, those of us who own property, of course, but as you saw in that graph, the median sale prices have been going up and down a little bit, and we see the same thing here. But as I said in the headlines, look, over the last 12 months, Wellington values have been soft again, and there we go, down 5%. Over the last 3 months, we had seen a bit of a recovery. Well, that has now been eroded. So again, over the last 3 months, completely flat. There's the graph there, so you can see in sort of second half 2023, as we were heading into the election, vendors were holding their properties back. And so as a result, prices had broadly stabilized. So we had some buyers stepping forward because there was rumors that interest rates had perhaps were getting close to peaking. There was a wee while yet before we started reducing yet, of course, but close to peaking in sort of mid 2023. Excuse me. And so we had vendors pulling back before the election, buyers stepping forward a little bit, and so the market strengthened a little. Then after the election had passed, we saw an enormous increase in vendors stepping forward. At the same time, there was some new buyer reluctance because of the uncertainty around the labour market in Wellington, in particular with the public sector. And so that brought about a lot of softness in the market again, as you can see there, from the orange graph being the 3-month total. Then more recently, sort of late 2024, some recovery in that. And then particularly more recently again, that recovery has been eroded again. So you can see there the Wellington region down 5% over the last year, flat over the last 3 months, down 0.3% over the last 1 month. So falling over the last 12 months or so generally, and back down to neutral in the last 3 months. So over the last year, looking at the various territorial authorities, so generally Wellington has been soft across the board. and in particular Wellington City, as you can see there, with almost 8% down on 12 months ago. So it seems to have hit the city harder than the Hutt Valleys and Pororua. The last 3 months, again, the smaller the data set, the more these things bounce around. So you can see there, Upper Hutt softer than Wellington City over the last 3 months. And that's Wellington City there. So you can see the graph for Wellington City, much more like a sawtooth, much more variability in there. We tend to get deeper troughs. We tend to get higher highs. But the overall pattern is very, very similar to the region. And you can see, again, you can see broadly speaking, heading back down to zero in December 2024. But look, down 8% over the last year, a small drop over the last 3 months. There was some recovery, as you can see here, late 2024, but all of that recovery has been eroded essentially because we've seen quite a drop of over 1% in the last month. That's December. Now, of course, this is based on a really small, actually, no, it's not such a small data set, because there are quite a number of sales still taking place in December. Not so many new listings, but quite a lot of sales. So new listings, this is the supply coming to the market. As you would expect, as we head into Christmas, new listings dry right up, because generally activity takes a holiday, and so does everyone else. So everyone's really distracted and making, going on holiday and arranging family Christmases and so on. So December is typically a very low listing month. And that was certainly the case in last month in December, 189 listings. Now that is particularly anemic. So versus 233 a year ago and 209 2 years ago. And if you see the graph there, that blue bar chart, under 200 for the first time, for the first time ever, except for April 2020 when we were on lockdown, marginally ahead of December 2 years ago. But compared to what's normal, 373, the normal level for December listings. So it's like basically half of what is normal. So certainly the number of new listings coming to the market has been really anemic in December in particular. Now, because December is such a low listing volume, normally it doesn't have quite the same gravitas, quite the same credibility, in my opinion. But nonetheless, roughly half of what's normal is you got to say is not insignificant. Now, of course, is that good for sellers? Is that good for buyers? Generally, fewer listings coming to market is good for sellers, not good for buyers. We have seen, as you can see in the 6-month moving average there, as we headed into the election, like I said, sellers went on strike, listing volumes coming down. Then after the election, we saw this massive increase for the following 12 months. More recently, we've seen the trend reverse and go back in the other direction. So the last 6 months or so, things heading in the right direction from a seller's perspective, in that we have had less stock coming to market. If you're about to sell your property, then the fewer other listings that you're competing with, the better. We have data that's absolutely inescapable, and that shows that the more open homes there are in the marketplace, the fewer buyers go to each open home. Now that's just absolute logic, but we've got the data there to prove it. So the fewer listings coming to the market, that is unquestionably better news for sellers, not such good news for buyers. And there it is compared to 12 months ago. So for a long time, we have seen more stock coming to the market, sometimes a lot more, like double, than we saw the same month 12 months earlier. And for the first time since, November 2023, we've seen fewer listings come to the market than the same month a year ago. So again, like I say, that's good news for sellers. Number of sales, yes, on the other side of things, number of sales, 553, about the same as a year ago, but quite a bit up on 2 years ago. Again, the general trend is interesting here. So we have seen a fairly consistent, a few ups and a few downs, but fairly consistent trend of slowly increasing sale volumes. So new listing volumes going up and then coming down again, and all this erratic behavior, but consistently over the last 2 years since December 2022, broadly increasing sales volumes again. This is an underlying good sign for sellers. What's interesting, of course, is that compared to new listing volumes, we saw this huge, dramatic increase in new listings until kind of the last 6 months or so, whereas the number of sales taking place has been increasing, but only very modestly, very gradually. And when we compare it to what's normal, at least for December, you can see there that whilst we've been generally increasing gradually the sale volumes, we're still on a monthly basis, at least, still reasonably, we're still short on what is normal for sale volumes, for the month of December. So whilst we still were, same as a year ago and 20% up on 2 years ago on sales volume. So that's a good news story, but we're still well short of what is normal for December. And there it is in the other form, of course. Generally speaking, as you can see there, we have been seeing more sales taking place than a year ago. There have been some exceptions. And this most recent month, about the same as a year ago. How long does it take to sell? So you can see the general trend there, the red line again, generally increasing. So the last couple of kind of indicators have been reasonably underlying good news stories for sellers. This is not the best news story for sellers. It is generally taking longer to sell properties. Although the last couple of months, November, December, shorter in the number of days, the duration to sell, than the 4 months prior to that. So we're not up around the 50, which we were seeing mid to late-ish 2024. We're back down to early 40s, but that's still sort of roughly 10 days longer than what is normal overall, including the month of December. So it's still taking quite a long time to sell properties by historical norms. There's the inventory levels. So again, this is what looks like possibly turning a corner, heading in the right direction again for the first time in a while for sellers. You can see there that the inventory came right down, as I was saying, as we approached the election, turned a corner in October 2023, was going up consistently until the last couple of months, where we came back down significantly to 13 weeks, and then it's giving me a little bug here. Over the last couple of months, down to 13 weeks and then 12 weeks. So heading in the right direction there, again, from a seller's perspective. So, I mean, to me, the story that's emerging here when we look at everything on balance, yes, we've seen values soft. Values, of course, are a result of historical sales that have taken place. The sale actually taking place and the price is the very end of the process. The other things we're looking at here are indicators that start emerging before the actual sales results. The number of listings coming to the market, number of sales taking place, and inventory levels. These are all heading in positive direction for sellers. So hence my question, are we turning a corner? There's the long-term average for the inventory levels. So at 12 weeks, we're definitely below long-term average of 15 weeks, but we're not still below what has been normal for the last 10 years, which is more like 10 weeks. So it still doesn't yet, when compared to recent history, it doesn't yet feel like a seller's market. But if you look at this indicator only at 12 weeks versus a long-term average of 15 weeks, technically you would say that suggests it is, but it just doesn't feel like it because 10 weeks is not normal, is what's normal over the last 10 years or so. Trade me listings, look, it's been broadly level over the last 6 months from a 6-month average perspective. Obviously, these things go up and down quite a bit with seasonality. We saw it come down in December as we head into Christmas, and properties still continue to sell in the month of December. Now, as we're coming into January, we're seeing new listings come up significantly. We actually, interestingly, not this week, but last week, At Low & Co, we had our biggest week ever for new listings. We had 43 new listings come to the market in just 1 week. And so with sort of 700, I think, roughly, listings in Wellington City, which is where, of course, we operate, 43 in 1 week from just one agency is a big increase in new stock. So it does look like there's good levels of new supply coming onto the market at the moment, and you can see that little bump in gross overall stock levels on Trade Me as we headed from December to January, as you would expect. 19% ahead of a year ago, 12% ahead of 2 years ago. And there it is compared to 12 months ago. So we're still ahead of where we were 12 months ago, just not to the same degree as we've been seeing in the last 6 months or so. And I think that's it. So in summary, look, values, yes, values in Wellington have been weak over the last year. We saw some strength returning late-ish last year. Over the last 3 months, that has been eroded again, unfortunately. Wellington City has been particularly weak in terms of values. New listings are coming down. And a particularly low level of listings in December. Sales volumes continue to gently rise, and that has been a very consistent theme over the last kind of 18 months or so. So that's underlying positive trend for sellers. Duration to sellers up longer than a year ago, but down compared to sort of 3 and 6 months ago. So again, possibly turning a corner. Inventory down over the last 2 months. Trade Me listings more than 12 months ago, and we're seeing an increase as we head into the new year, which is, of course, just seasonal norms. Message to sellers, as I said at the start, values are slightly lower than a year ago, especially in the city. But there are signs, as I've been indicating, that perhaps we're starting to turn a corner. Perhaps it's starting to look a bit better going forward for sellers. And for buyers, I say there's still lots to choose from, so getting amongst it. Big thanks, of course, as always, to Real Estate Institute and realestate.co.nz. That is everything I have for you today, folks. So if you've got any questions, happy to chat.
Hey, Adam.
Hi, who we got?
Monica.
Hi, Monica.
So my question, I suppose, is of the 43, or of the houses that are coming on the market, are these more owner occupiers? Are these house and income? Are these multi-units? What is the makeup looking like? Is it something that an investor, is it investors selling off their stock, or is it homeowners looking to move more? What does that demographic look like?
I haven't got any hard numbers on that, but my sense, I can't notice anything that's particularly unusual. For 3 years, as you know, investors have been smashed, and so most investors are still licking their wounds. I have been, over the last 6 months or so, been seeing some more new investors come to market, people who are considering their first investment purchase. In terms of investor sales, any investor who talks to me about selling, I try and find properties that they have that could be sold to owner occupiers, because the investor buyers are still less active, shall we say. More active than 6 months ago, but that's coming off the lowest base. I personally have just brought this week to a 4-flat property and a home and income to market, but that's just me. So look, I haven't seen any significant change away from what I would consider a normal market. Of course, in a normal market, the majority of people selling their properties are owner occupiers, and because investor buyers have been very, very quiet, I'm sure pretty much everyone is advising clients not to sell multi-flat properties, and properties that would be really only suited to investor buyers, because there isn't a lot of activity in that part of the market. Now, I'm not sure if that answers your question. Does that help at all?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
More curiosity than anything else.
Yeah. Now, in general, the investor space, the investor segment is still quiet. I have seen reports that more investors are getting approved for finance, so people are starting to get ready to purchase again. They're getting themselves into a position, but I think there's so many things they've been going against the investors in the last few years. We had the tax, but also we've had these costs increasing, in particular rates and insurance. Rents in Wellington have not been rising, so everything's been going the wrong way, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Little bit disheartening at the moment, but that's fine.
Yeah,
It's
no,
all a
no.
cycle for a reason.
It will change, and there's no question that from here things will get better. Generally, I mean, it just can't get any worse. I can't imagine.
Labor
And
could get back in.
Labor, well, I'm talking in the immediate future. Yes, Labor could get back in. That's absolute. It's always a possibility. I mean, look, I can't help but think that if they do restore their tax rules, then there will seriously be a boycotting of the market by investors. It just won't make sense to own investment property, and so gradually, the supply of investments will be eroded, and that will have the obvious response in terms of rents. And so, unless the government want to play a bigger and bigger and bigger role in providing housing for the lower socioeconomic groups or the tenants, then rents just have to go up. And so at some point, the system will break because ultimately the equation has to balance in terms of money in versus money out. Otherwise,
Yep,
the market doesn't work, right?
absolutely.
I'm hoping that we'll get more sellers and more buyers stepping forward. So we'll get more turnover, more liquidity, but if a balance of supply and demand coming forward, hopefully not too much change in prices. I think it'll be good for the market and the economy if prices don't start running away from us anytime soon. But the greater liquidity will let buyers and sellers just get on with life. So that's my hope for 2025 anyway. If you want individual advice, of course, then please reach out. Happy to help. You know how to get me. Otherwise, thanks for checking in. Happy New Year to all, and